at this moment. You will not believe this, but as I was driving out here this morning, I wondered what the song of preparation would be. Because if you were here yesterday at the church meeting, you would know that Reverend Ross made the statement that I only found out on Thursday that I was on the schedule for today. And as I was driving here this morning, I was saying to myself, oh Lord, if I'd known, I would have asked my cousin Graham Tolliver to sing a song. Where are you, Graham? Where are you? Absolutely amazing. The last time I was here with my grandsons, Graham sang Falling in Love with Jesus. And about a month later, I was driving the boys in Ajax, Ontario. That song came on the radio. And my grandson, the youngest one, the 8-year-old, he said, Nanny, that's the song your cousin was singing in church. It had that much of an impact on him. So I can't wait until I go back to Ajax next week. And I will be playing, that will be on YouTube, right? Yes. I will be, I see Melinda there videotaping, and I know Minister Debbie will put it on. And I don't know, Sean, is that something? I'm sorry to catch you. Is that something you wrote?
No.
No.
I'll send you the link to the song.
It's absolutely beautiful. I don't want the link. I want my cousin Graham and this choir singing. So I've got the hookup with the video. So just praise the Lord. Oh, I left my Bible there. So we're going to start with a word from the Lord. Did you put this up, Maxine? Yeah. Psalm 146, verses 1 to 10. Oh, it is there. Okay. We'll read this together all my life. I will sing praise to my God as long as I live. The theme for this quarter is embracing forgiveness, true deliverance. And what I plan to share with you today, some of the work that I've been doing, but really looking at the theme of forgiveness and healing through the work of the government of Canada and the African Canadian. We've just finished Black History Month. I always say Black History Month is a time that we pause, but we really celebrate Black history all year long. Yeah. This is actually my 8th talk in the past 6 days in 3 cities and 2 provinces. And this is our week off. This is our week off. But, and sometimes people often ask me, how do you do it? How do you keep going? And really, it's God.
Amen.
I am so grateful to be a believer. I am so grateful that I believe in God. And I'm so grateful that as a believer, I know that God carries me. I know that God leads me. I know that God guides me. As He does all of us, whether we're believers or not. It's only when we are believers that we get that true deliverance, because we know. So for Black History Month, one of the things that I've been doing in the Senate and in the community all over the place is really focusing on these 3 themes: honor, reflect, and act. And when we're talking about honoring, it's honoring our ancestors. It's honoring our accomplishments. It's honoring all of the work that our ancestors have done to pave the way, to create these pathways that we get to enjoy today. And for as much as we complain about this, that, and the other thing, most of us are actually living pretty good. Most of us have homes. most of us have relatively good health. You know, we may have bad days, we may have aches and pains, and God knows I have them. But you know, it's not too bad. And sometimes we forget. Sometimes we forget that. So to honor, and to honor our heritage. One of the ways that I honored the heritage of East Preston this year, I don't know if you saw it, but I made a tribute to the East Preston Daycare Center and to you, Reverend Ross. Did you actually get a copy of that? Yes. Yeah, so I made a tribute in the Senate acknowledging the 40th anniversary. Is it 40th or 45th? 45th. The 45th anniversary of the East Preston Daycare Center. Recognizing Reverend Ross as the founder, the current executive director, and the long-term staff. And that's now in the history of Canada. It's in our history books. And that's part of honoring our past. And we must remember the past. There's also a time to reflect on the present. And one of the things I really emphasize in terms of reflecting on the present is reflecting on the reality that we still have a lot of issues that we're dealing with. Anti-Black racism is alive and well. And the way it shows up in different everyday experiences for all of us. Whether it's racial profiling in a store, whether it's being stopped by police even though street checks have stopped. Whether it's the way the media reports. We must do better in this country. And I see it as part of my responsibility to speak out about these things in ways that help bring honor and dignity to our community, but at the same time, making the point. Canada must do better. Amen. Canada must do better for us. And that's the next thing that I talk about, is act. Really encouraging everyone to take action. I did a talk with my grandson's grade 3 class for Black History Month because he asked me to. Because he was upset because I was in the grade 5 class of his older brother. They're studying government. He knew so much about government. The teacher said, "How do you know so much, Damon?" Damon said, "Well, my daddy's a senator." And they invited me in. Gavin's class is across the hall. Gavin became really upset. "Nanny, how can you go to Damon's class and not come to mine?" And he talked to his teacher, and his teacher invited me in. She said, "We don't do government. But Black History Month is coming. Would you come and speak about Black History Month?" And I did. She had Gavin introduce me. Gavin said, "This is Wanda Thomas Bernard." That's what he calls me when he's not calling. "This is Wanda Thomas Bernard. She's my grandmother. And she's also a senator. So the most important job I have is being grandmother to those two." But in that class, I talked about action. And I said to these 8-year-olds, what actions can you take to make your school better, to make your class better, to make your community better? And you'd be amazed at the things they shared. 8-year-olds in grade 3. So we can all act. We can all do something. God gives us the ability to act. And it's our responsibility to act on it. So when I think about this whole idea of Black History Month and the action, one of the actions is really pushing for more acknowledgement from our government. One of the ways that the government could actually do reparations for African Canadians is through an apology. We made a list in our office of all of the groups that have had wrongs done to them, and all of the apologies. And there's not one African Canadian organization from the government of Canada that has received an apology. And it is time. It is time. So when we talk about reparations, financial reparations, resources, and opportunities, and I think the government is inching towards making some changes. The last two federal budgets had money designated for African Canadians, had money designated for mental health, resources for African Canadians. Just last Monday, was mental health for African Canadians in Toronto and Ottawa. We need to have the same in Halifax. We need to have the same in Halifax. We need to have the same across the country. Our mental health is a grave concern. It's a grave concern. As I listen to your prayers this morning, and people are praying for this church, praying for this community, and that's really important. We're acknowledging that there are concerns, but we also need to put action behind those prayers. I had the great privilege of welcoming Wanda Robson to the Senate a couple of weeks ago. So Wanda Robson is now 93 years old. She's Viola Desmond's baby sister. Let me remind you of this. Wanda Robson went back to university at the age of 72, graduated at the age of 75. And it was through her going to university that she discovered the real meaning behind her sister's arrest. And she has publicly shared that when her sister was arrested and spent the night in jail in November 1946 for daring to sit in the whites-only section of the segregated movie theater, Wanda felt ashamed. Her sister was in jail. She felt ashamed. She didn't understand. And it was only when she went back to school and she's studying social justice, and one of the examples that the professor was using was the example of Viola Desmond. And if it wasn't for that, Wanda is the person responsible for really pushing and making this public, making it known. And she and I had a public conversation at the National Museum of History for their Black History Month event. It was truly amazing. But we also had the East Preston Daycare Center represented that day. The current executive director, Trina Frazier, and one of the staff members, Marina Brooks. And that's Wanda's husband, John. We showed these panels that Heritage Canada has developed. And Trina and Marina, I think, almost fainted when they saw on one of the panels, under the title Port in the Storm. Any of you remember the Stag? Great, Brooks is here, no one. The Stag Hotel. The Stag Hotel. And I think Marina and Trina recognized one of their family members in the photo on this panel in the Senate of Canada. Unbelievable. And you can only imagine the source of pride that they felt when they saw this. And they're just there studying these panels, looking at Black history in Canada. Who knew that East Preston, Stag Hotel of East Preston, you were there. You were there. You are there. And these panels, they've sent everywhere around the country. This is just a sampling of the work I do. There are days I wish I was two people. But advocacy work, community connections, committees and associations, legislation. I've highlighted Emancipation Day. And that's what I want to speak about for a moment. In the last Parliament, I introduced, as you know, I talked about it here, I introduced a bill to have Canada recognize Emancipation Day. I think if Canada recognizes Emancipation Day, it means Canada recognizes and acknowledges and apologizes for the history of slavery of African people. Ontario recognizes Emancipation Day, but the rest of Canada does not. And the bill didn't pass. It didn't get past second reading because, quite frankly, the opposition didn't want it to pass. And begged and pleaded, did everything I could to get it onto the agenda because I knew if it came forward, we had enough votes to pass it. But they wouldn't let it go forward, so it died. That's called dying on the order paper. So it died on the order paper, but I didn't die. Amen. God has kept me here. I'm here for a reason. And I decided, I prayed about this and I made a decision that I was not going to bring it forward in the Senate. I decided that it was best that it come to the House of Commons. That the government, my name doesn't need to be attached to this. It's not about me. It's not about me, it's about getting this through. And I'm so thrilled to be able to say that this Member of Parliament, Majid Jahari, is sponsoring a motion. And the difference between a motion and a bill has to go to four stages in the House of Commons, and then the same 4 stages in the Senate before it can pass. Motion doesn't. A motion, once it's put forward and it's passed, it's passed. He is excited. He's an MP from Toronto. He got some pressure, I think, from somewhere. But he stepped up. He's the advocate now. He's the champion for this bill. And I believe that it will pass in this session. The way it works, a member of cabinet, so a cabinet minister or parliamentary secretary cannot bring forward private motions or private bills. So it has to be a backbencher. And they have what they call a lottery system. And he's close, he's high up in the lottery. So he introduced this on February 20th. There's a strong possibility it could pass through before we rise in June. And if it does, it means come August 1st, all of Canada will have an invitation to mark Emancipation Day. And from that, I see a lot of things flowing from that. So August 1st, 1834 is when the British abolished slavery. And 83, and it came into effect 84. And we've not had that acknowledgement here in Canada, and it is time. It really is time. And I see this as a form of reparations. I see this as creating space for healing. When we heal as a nation, when we heal as a collective, it will filter down to the kind of trauma we're experiencing right here in East Preston Church, right here in the community of East Preston. But we need to invest in our healing. We need to own our healing. We need to make those healing journeys our journeys. But I'm hoping that this bill will also not just acknowledge Canada's roots in anti-Black racism, but put further, stronger commitments to fighting anti-Black racism. I sent out a press release about an issue of anti-Black racism, and no media nationally picked it up. They didn't see it as important enough. So I have high hopes for what can happen. But it would also acknowledge the multi-generational harms caused by slavery. And we may not recognize it, we may not own it, but we are all wounded. We are all wounded. And that woundedness is rooted in our history. And part of that history is the history of slavery. And part of the woundedness comes from the country not really acknowledging it. Canada has always presented itself as being better than our neighbors to the south. Canada has always presented itself as being a safe haven. When you read any history at all about black people in Canada, it's really about the Underground Railroad. And yes, the Underground Railroad happened, and yes, that was fabulous. But we need to tell the whole story. We need to tell the whole history. We need to make sure that that entire history is taught in schools. When I was in Gavin's class, and one of the pictures I show was one of me here at segregated school, and the kids would say, well, what country did you grow up in? They didn't realize there were segregated schools in Canada. They really didn't know, and they were. It was sort of like they were shocked. Their eyes were wide. I mean, that happened here in Canada. Yes, it did. And yes, segregated schools weren't just in Nova Scotia; they were in Ontario too. I certainly try to involve the boys as much as I can in different things, and one of the things is celebrating Emancipation Day in Owen Sound, Ontario. Owen Sound, how can I describe where it is? My brother Barry and his family live in Orangeville, which is that west, I guess? North. West? North. I have no sense of direction. Was that Terry? Help me out, Terry. So Orangeville is
northwest. Also.
Northwest.
Yeah.
Northwest. And then Owen Sound is even beyond that, about an hour or so beyond that. So I take the boys, and they got to spend time with the town crier, ringing in Emancipation Day. If you ask those boys, and that little boy on the other side, he was just in the audience, but all three of them could be my grandsons. They look alike, right? But Emancipation Day is a celebration of our survival, first and foremost. We have survived. Amen. It's a celebration of our human rights. Our human rights are trampled on every single day. And it's time to stop. And it's a celebration of equality, of culture, and resilience. And I am grateful. I am grateful for the allies that I work with that help me spread the word. I'm grateful for the allies that are ready to vote for this motion when it comes forward. So in my work, I'll come back to this slide, in social justice and mental health and disability issues and autism issues, doing work with black communities across the country. There's only 3 black senators of 105. And so we're not in every province, but we have to be in every province. So doing a lot of traveling, visiting schools and youth. I had the privilege of visiting Madeline Simon's middle school this past week. And to my surprise, and I was saying to these kids, you know, you are so privileged to be in a school. I think one of the only, maybe there's 1 or 2 others, schools named after black Nova Scotians. I think there's a couple of others, but this is the only one that I was aware of named after a black Nova Scotian woman. The teachers and the students looked at me with blank stares. They didn't know Madeline Simons was a black woman. Oh my God. Exactly. So we've got some work to do. Wow. We've got some work to do with Madeline Simons Middle School. But there's a grade 8 class, Mrs. Ernst's grade 8 class, for the Delmore Buddy Day History Challenges. They did a presentation on East Preston. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. They have, it's electronic. So if you put your phone over the cue card for each of these places that they've created using clay models, it brings up your website. So I saw the East Preston United Baptist Church. I saw the East Preston Empowerment Academy. I saw the East Preston Daycare Center, the East Preston Daycare and Family Resource Center, the East Preston Recreation Center. These kids, and listen to this, they got the idea from the CBC program, Still Standing. Imagine that. I found out about it because I saw it on Twitter. I saw this Twitter post. Oh, and Terry Thomas's, what does he call it? The carriage. But one of the things that many of my colleagues teased me about, because they saw the show, Still Standing, and they're waiting for Terry to show up with me in the carriage. Terry said if he can find a way to make it happen, he will. And so that's the work. You know, and every day, I'm not here, I'm not home a lot. I'm really not home a lot. And I don't want people to be upset about the fact that I'm not here a lot. I don't have to be with you physically. I don't have to be with you physically. To be feeling your spirit. Amen. To be advocating for your voices. Amen. To be pushing for change for all of us. I don't have to be here in church to be doing that. No. And I can't be.
Yeah, you can't be.
You know, with my Senate responsibilities and also the responsibilities I have as a grandparent. I've been home for the last 2 weekends, and my grandson's on the phone, Nanny, when are you coming back? We miss you, Nanny. Pops is there. Pops is a nanny now. So I'll just go back for a second, and just let me say this. East Preston Church, you are deeply important. You're important to this community. You're important to me. And you're known to the country. And you're known internationally. Okay? You are known internationally. The work that Pastor Porter did in terms of putting so much of what East Preston was doing live and online. The online. My grandsons know this church. They've only been here twice, but they've heard many, many services. And so let me say today that as you go forward, and Pastor Ross, as you go forward as interim pastor, and church, as you go forward, remember the place you have in this community amongst all members, and even those who are not active members. You have a place. And so when we think about healing and deliverance, remember that we all have a part to play. And our silence really doesn't protect us. Our silence doesn't protect us. And so we need to be active agents in terms of leading change that we want to see. And just know that I'm doing my bit from the position that I hold. And I take those responsibilities very seriously. I feel the weight of those responsibilities. But I know East Preston is praying for me. East Preston is praying with me. And as we go forward, we walk this journey together. Let us pray. Father God, I just thank you. I thank you, God, for health and strength. I thank you, God, for vision. I thank you, God, for this church. I thank you, God, for the journey this church has been on and the journey it is on now. God, I ask for continued strength for Reverend Ross as she continues to lead. I ask for strength for the executive of this church. God, please work with them and through them. And I pray for the members. And dear God, when I think about yesterday and how filled this church was yesterday, and God, I look at the empty pews today, I pray, God, that the message will go forward, that we need people to be present in all of these spaces, not just some of these spaces. God, continued blessings. I pray for continued blessings on all who are here and all who will see this message. These things I ask in your name.